Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. If you haven't already been formally welcomed, please allow me to welcome you to the 2025 NRC Regulatory Information Conference. My name is Cindy Rosales Cooper, and I have the honor of being the session chair of today's session, W9, Blazing New Trails in Emergency Preparedness, which includes a demonstration of FEMA's Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, otherwise known as IPAWS. As you know, the NRC is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and considering all of the events and advancements over the past 50 years in radiological emergency preparedness, today we get to look forward to hearing some of the perspectives on EP from our international, federal, state, and local partners. Together, we've blazed new trails in EP for new nuclear technologies like small modular reactors, non-light water reactors, floating nuclear power, and microreactors. The next 50 years promises to be an exciting journey for emergency preparedness. And although technology is changing, the risks and the hazards we face are familiar and yet manageable. This session will feature a diverse panel of subject matter experts who will discuss what's to come in radiological EP over the next 50 years. And as I mentioned, we're also going to have an exciting demonstration of IPAWS. To that end, we have a very distinguished panel of guests in our session today. First, we have the Honorable Dr. Tomoyuki Tsujiyama, who is a commissioner of the Nuclear Regulatory Authority of Japan. And he's going to share with us the most recent examples of emergency preparedness, especially in the area of notification of the public and the experiences that the Japanese people had during and post Fukushima. We also have Dr. Ryan Rockerban, who's a senior advisor at the National Nuclear Security Administration, and he's going to talk about some exciting things that are happening in research with respect to emergency preparedness. And to round that off, we have Administrator Kevin Bourne, who is the administrator of the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, and he's going to talk from the state perspective as well as the local counties and other off-site response organizations with respect to how we go about communicating with the public and enduring an emergency. We'll round out the presentation with a demonstration from our colleagues at FEMA, from FEMA, who will give us a demonstration of IPAWS. Earlier on, you saw a slide up here, and it'll come back up, that has a QR code so that at the end of the presentations, you can use that to submit questions, and we'll get the questions and we'll present them to our panelists. And I'd also like to, at this time, introduce our session coordinator, Mr. Dane Miel. He's over there at the table, and sitting next to him is our session liaison, Kyler Coleman Foley. So if you need any assistance, or if you're having trouble with your questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to them. I just want to take a minute or two to remind us of the NRC's approach to emergency preparedness. The NRC's EP regulations provide reasonable assurance that protective actions can and will be taken in the event of an incident or an accident. Nuclear facilities that are licensed by the NRC must provide reasonable assurance of adequate protection from risks to the public. This licensing process requires applicants to analyze risks, which are then evaluated by the NRC to ensure emergency plans are developed to address these risks. Within our defense in depth construct of nuclear safety, EP is the final layer of defense in depth. And the established planning basis for EP relies on a spectrum of accidents. Scoping the planning efforts require information related to the distance, time, and materials released from the spectrum of accidents. We also employ a graded approach to licensing EP. The NRC allows for a scalable approach to emergency preparedness that's based upon the relative radiological risk, source term, and potential hazards, amongst other considerations. This means that facilities will have an emergency plan commensurate with the facility's specific risks and hazards. Plans that meet NRC EP regulations provide reasonable assurance of adequate protection. And this well-established approach considers a spectrum of emergency preparedness criteria and ensures capabilities are in place in all licensed facilities that are protective of public health and safety. Congress passed the Nuclear Energy Innovation Modernization Act, otherwise known as NEMA, directing the NRC to develop regulatory infrastructure to support the development and commercialization of new and advanced nuclear reactors. As a result, the NRC has published and is currently working on various rulemaking activities involving emergency preparedness. In all of these activities, emergency preparedness is included as an essential component of our defense in depth philosophy. However, the requirements for EP may look different depending on the facility and the type. For example, our Part 50.160 was published at the end of 2023, and it contains updated EP requirements and guidance for SMRs and other nuclear technologies. The scope of the EP regulations are limited to SMRs licensed to produce less than 1,000 megawatts thermal power, and of course, ONTs. The scope of the EP for SMR and ONT regulations do not include emergency planning, preparation, or response for large light waters, fuel cycle facilities, or currently operating non-power reactors, such as research and test reactors. Next, I'd like to just remind you that EP for us involves the whole community. And I'm sure as you will hear from Kevin Bourne from Louisiana, and even some of the EP examples that you'll hear from Dr. Tsujiyama on Japan's approach. But in the USA, our EP involves our emergency preparedness program involves the whole community approach. As you can see demonstrated on this slide, the planning concepts we focus on fit in with the US National Preparedness Goal, which defines what it means for the whole community to be prepared for all types of disasters and emergencies. State and local authorities are responsible for public health and safety. They assess their own capabilities and planning needs and voluntarily participate in NRC licensee planning. Their responsibilities to the community does not change depending on whether or not there is an EPZ. The only thing that changes with the EPZ is whether or not NRC requires findings and determinations on the state of off-site preparedness. If there is an EPZ that extends beyond the site boundary, then NRC has additional planning requirements for off-site plans. States and locals voluntarily participate in the planning, and our colleagues, our federal partners, FEMA, can assist states and locals with that planning. FEMA will also provide findings and determinations on the state of off-site preparedness to NRC for our overall reasonable assurance determination. But if there is a site boundary EPZ or no EPZ, the planning standards still ensure appropriate communication, coordination, and cooperation with off-site response organizations is achieved. Finally, I'd just like to end with a bit of notes on our cooperation, the NRC's cooperation with our federal partner, FEMA. A fundamental aspect of our approach to EP is embedded in our partnership with FEMA. We take our C4 approach to our partnership. We communicate, we coordinate, we complement, and we contribute, and we communicate again to each other's mission for the protection of public health and safety in radiological emergency preparedness. At the end, this is our contact information at the NRC if you have any questions for us at the end of this session. So with that, I will now turn it over to our distinguished guest, the Honorable Dr. Tsujiyama from Japan.
Okay, so I'm Tomoyuki Sugiyama, a Commissioner of the Nuclear Regulation Authority of Japan. It's my pleasure to be here and to make my brief presentation on the status of nuclear emergency public notification using smartphones in Japan. So first, I'd like to look back on 2011, the year of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station's accident. Okay, so in that time, so we had means of notification, for example, local emergency alert system prepared by local government, television and radio broadcast, and internet news and blogs and Twitter at that time. And their corresponding devices were street speakers, and specialized radio receivers provided by local government. Actually, my house has it because I live, my house is in the PAZ of some nuclear power station. And television, radio, and wired telephone, ordinary telephone. And in 2011, so cell phones with capabilities of camera, internet connection, and TV receiving. So, but this is not the present smartphone. So Japanese smartphones, in that time, but not had the uniform standard. So there were many platforms, so we did not have any common applications. But it was very powerful tool when we lost normal communication tools. But we had some problems. Typically in Japan, we should be ready for combined disaster. I mean, so in case of Fukushima, in case of 2011 case, so first we had very big earthquake and the following tsunami. We lost infrastructures, and after we had nuclear emergency. So we had failure of electric power supply, and cellular phones were available during the first 10 or not 20 hours. Anyhow, finally, the run out of batteries of cellular network relay station, disabled our communication. That was our very important lessons. So now, their battery capacity was enlarged, but still, so such technologies are under development. For example, relay stations with solar panels, just under development. And these days, so we have the present smartphone, and we have smartphone applications. Advantages of smartphones are widespread in all generations as a personal device. Appropriate information according to their user's location. I mean, so smartphone has locating function, so sender can choose the receiver. And the push notification functions by specific applications. And now, so in Japan, there is mainly two independent actions about development of smartphone applications. The first one is nuclear emergency applications by local governments. And this activity is financially supported by the Cabinet Office of Japan. And so information to residents on evacuation timing to take iodine tablet and so on. Such information is provided to the resident. The people registered to their local government. And such application is using two-dimensional barcode, that means a QR code, for efficient evacuation procedures. For example, QR code is used for checking their, proof of screening result, or some information sharing at the, gathering place for evacuation. Another activity is made by private company, LY Corporation. This is LINE Yahoo company, so Yahoo Japan. I should note that Yahoo Japan is financially independent from Yahoo USA. So this is Japan's unique activity. So Yahoo Japan application is not only for nuclear emergency. Various disaster information is provided to people in the relevant area, including visitors, temporary visitors. That's very important. And this application can be combined with the application LINE. This is most popular messaging application in Japan. And so I will focus on the second one, so activity by Yahoo Japan. So the very complicated figures, but so meaning is, so this application gathers information from authorized authorities. That means informations are authorized, and information are integrated and provided by this application to people. And surprisingly, this application is developing and providing this application is the voluntary activity by this company. They are not paid by government or local government. So this is very, so I appreciate their effort to develop and provide this service. But I have some fear. So that means their future activity is not guaranteed. So I feel necessity of contract with them or some agreement. Anyhow, we need guarantee of future availability. So that's all my presentation. Thank you.
All right, we're good? Thank you. And my clicker, yes, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Rockerbrand. I'm a senior advisor with the National Nuclear Security Administration. First, let me just say thank you for the honor to be here with this distinguished panel. Thank you, Cindy, and everybody for your efforts. Where's Dwayne? Dwayne's out there somewhere, too. There he is. We'll be looking around because those bright lights are pretty taxing up here, but and I wanted to also give a shout out to Todd Smith, wherever you are. I'm sitting here because of you, Todd. I remember I came here last year was the first time I attended this conference, and I mentioned to him, hey, I'm going to start my PhD, and I'm really interested in this AI stuff and SMR stuff, and he showed me the ropes, introduced me to a bunch of people, and I'm sitting here because of you today, so thank you, Todd. With that said, I just recently finished on my dissertation, and so I thought it'd be helpful to maybe share a little bit about some of the findings, the conclusions, and some recommendations that I had out of that. My background is, by trade, I'm an emergency manager, but I'm a geek at heart, and I just love all the stuff that's happening in this industry. So just really proud to be here and share some of this stuff with you. Now, as I share some of this, please understand this is basically what I defended on, so some of this data is really just carrying forward, and thoughts and views are my own. And so I don't really look at this as a problem. I see this as a huge opportunity, right? So it's been said that what a profound situation we're in here today as a group, all of us as a collective. We're going to experience 100 years of technological change in the next 5 years. I can't think of a better time to be around, to be part of that experience, and to help contribute to that. Just think about that for a second. 100 years of change in the next 5 years. And you all are really the tip of the spear when it comes to the technological components that are going to help drive that change for the next 25 and 50 years. And so that really blew me away when I started to do some of this analysis. The other piece, too, is, everyone hears about AI and data centers and the power requirements. You know, we're looking at north of 20% increase in the global population in the next 25 years. We're at about 8 billion people. We're going to be around 9.7 billion people in 25 years. About 8% growth domestically here in the US. So that's a huge amount of power requirements. That's before you even start to increase the power requirements that are going to come from robotics and humanoids that are going to start becoming commonplace in every household. And so this prolific growth in power requirement is really just astounding, and SMRs are going to play a huge role in that delivery. And so I'll talk a little bit about the EPZs as well, but this is really where my mentality started as an emergency manager. You see here in the green, this is our domestic fleet of NPPs, and we see this Area B. So Area B, without subsequent licensing renewals, that's where we'd see that drop off. But if we continue and sustain at that level, and you compound that with the future required growth for tripling nuclear by 2050, that's where we see that dramatic escalation in nuclear capability. And that's my focus was on Area A. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So like any good researcher, you try and do a deep dive on the lit review. Here's what I learned. AI is not new when it comes to nuclear. You guys have been doing this for decades, and you've been doing it really well, but I think because of generative AI and the acceleration of where we're at with new AI technology, it's just compounded that opportunity. So it was really great to see and learn some of the capabilities that have been brought to bear to date and to see the future path of where AI is going to be in nuclear. Everything and all things are SMR today, right? But at the end of the day, you got to prove it. We've got to get it on the street. We've got to get it in the ground, wherever it's going to be. But that capability has to prove itself when it comes to levelized cost of energy and the CapEx investment that's going to take up front to really birth that industry. And we'll talk a little bit about EPR in a second. So why did I do this? So as an emergency manager, I was just looking at this massive change over the next 25 years. The expertise that you all bring to bear that's going to help proliferate this next 5 years of evolutionary change when it comes to technology. And then how does that work with FEMA, state and local implementations of emergency preparedness and response? And so for me, it was all about this conflux, right? How do you take AI, marry that with EPR, and then put that into an SMR implementation strategy? What do those three acronyms look like to an emergency manager on the ground? Now, when you look at the existing fleet today, we've got about 55 sites, right, across 94, 95 reactors, but they really only touch 51 counties domestically here in the United States. There's 3,144 counties in the US or county equivalents. So there's only a small amount of that population from a county perspective that live and breathe NPPs. And so if you have that massive proliferation in new technology, new SMR implementations, you're going to be touching an audience that is very unfamiliar with what nuclear really means in their backyard. And so what I did is I tried to juxtapose these research questions against Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm theory, or traditionally if you look at Everett Rogers' diffusion of innovation, basically how do you adopt new technology into your environment? That's how I kind of weighted this research. So I won't get into the weeds here and bore you with all the study stuff, but I did a modified Delphi study. There are many of you in this room that participated in the early stages of this. I can't thank you enough for your contributions. I did this primarily online. I tried to create a bunch of creative future planning scenarios to somewhat scare you, to invoke some thought. We did a bunch of YouTube shorts that I put online throughout the quarters to kind of generate some quantitative and qualitative data, and then surveys to kind of capture that information. I had the privilege and opportunity to present some of those findings throughout each stage of each quarter of last year. So at the ICONS conference at IAEA, the SMR conference at the end of the year. Cindy was gracious enough with Todd to bear with me out at the REP conference at the Naval Postgraduate School at that training opportunity. So I had this constant feedback loop to help reinforce some of the findings and validate some of the information that I was capturing along the way through this iterative process. So at the end of the day, there was kind of 5 buckets that I was hearing, okay? So the first is that everybody loves AI. What was interesting was, from the emergency management perspective, I had a really good sample size, but only half of that community even knew what an SMR was. That really blew me away, right? So it's very new to this environment. Only 20% at best had played with AI, right? And less than 5% maybe had even attempted to use AI in a real-world disaster before, during, or after. So that's really interesting. It just shows the nascency of this industry, whether it comes to AI or SMRs. So that confluence of these coming together in such a short period of time is something I think we really need to take pause and look at and embrace. The second thing was remote operations. So there was a lot of things I heard and researched about concerns and opportunities about remote operations or in the vicinity operations. So this more of a moving from an on-prem, fully on-site, safety, security standards at the NPP facility like we traditionally know, how does that pivot to more of a hub and spoke model where you have centralized control of some of these SMRs that are around perhaps a state or whatever that geography is going to look like. So there was a lot of consternation about that. The staffing, right? You've got 80 plus different designs, 30 potential new vendors, that whole supply chain component of it, all very new. So the traditional folks that are doing the MPP large deliveries, we're gonna have a whole bunch of new players in this game, so how is that staffed? And then how are those folks trained? I heard a lot about the balancing of the cost efficiencies, right? Over time, how do you achieve those economies of scale? And the regulatory landscape. So my takeaway here when it comes to this fifth area was you're gonna have 3 vehicles, whether you go 50, 52, or soon to be 53 once that final rule is issued. Pick one, move forward, right? So this whole concept of, everybody wants to be fifth, that has to be yesterday's newspaper, right? So we need to move forward. People need to be bold and move to I wanna be first in this game, because time is of the essence when it comes to meeting the requirements of the demand that's in the marketplace today. So where I thought I really was challenged to find this, again, this confluence, right? Where do you see AI, EPR, and SMR, those fun 3 acronyms all in the same sentence? It really didn't, jump out at me. So for me, it was, as the emergency manager, how do we turn the public concern of, well, what if this and what if that, to, no, we have an aggressive strategy and we're gonna come at you with, we are ready. So what if you generate or dream up, we're ready strategy for that. In fact, we're gonna educate you in advance about how to accomplish that, because this is the future and this is what we want to accomplish. And you have to couple that with AI. So 3 kind of conclusions that came out of that. Again, everybody believes in AI, but everyone has a little bit of fear, whether it's hallucinations, whether it's about messaging, whether it's about the predictive analysis capabilities that would come out of this. So everyone still wants to make sure that there's a human in the loop, there's a human touch component to this to validate certain things. In an EPR space, an emergency manager mindset, we always say an 80% solution is best. I just need to make a decision, because no decision is a decision, and that could hurt your operations. So how do you move forward with some of these human in the loop strategies if time is not on your side? The last piece is just this specialized training. Again, a lot of different designs, a lot of nuances. How do you make sure that you've got capability? And we're training the cadre of folks that are going to run these facilities in the future to make sure that there's some ubiquity in terms of that standardization. And to close, I came up with the goal was to really establish a framework, whether it goes to an owner-operator, whether it goes to a local emergency manager. Turn the emergency managers into your champions for implementation. At the end of the day, that's the bumper sticker. And you can do that through this framework. So I created 5 recommendations with 3 corresponding actions. I won't go into the weeds on all these. But at the end of the day, the first one was enhancing risk. Use AI for the SMR implementations. So what do I mean by that? At the local level, you've got to go through a feasibility study. You've got to go through an analysis and environmental impact studies. You have to then turn that into a comprehensive plan integration to go through your county boards or your supervisors, whatever that strategy is going to be. But you want to be way ahead of that timetable, because that's not a turnkey implementation at the local level. So really be aggressive about how you do that, and use AI to help with the messaging there. On the EPR side, again, at the local level, there's a ton of planning initiatives that have to get done on an annual basis, right? So AI can help drive that as you move towards implementation of SMRs, whether it's integrating with threat hazard identification risk assessments, whether it's working with your comprehensive plans, whether it's working with your emergency operations plans at the local level. Have a voice in that conversation and give the emergency managers and the local county officials the opportunity to integrate, because that really helps with their scoring and potentially funding on the back end. Third was community engagement. we've all been privy to these implementations of different technologies, and sometimes you put the horse blinders on because you're just focusing on that implementation milestone and you forget the court of public opinion. So if you are not at the forefront of that and you're not driving that conversation up front about the benefits and here's what's to come, it's going to bite you in the end. So really having a steady stream of community engagement, use AI to help champion that, allow them to have an interactive agent, an AI agent, using some of these agentic tools in 2026, which will really be commonplace within the communities to help with the public education piece. Fourth is just in-house. So this is happening already. I just say put it on steroids. Really accelerate this. When it comes to replacing inspections, whether it's looking at predictive maintenance, using drones, using robotics, these tools are going to really help you, again, when you explain that this is why we're implementing certain measures to use in this remote operations or in the vicinity operations, unmanned staffed facilities that are within that site boundary. Will go a long way in terms of explaining how AI will help with SMR implementations. And last but not least, I explain this to folks as this is the equivalent of building the new auto industry, right? So we need to move from this concept of reactors on racks to actually having racks with reactors. We need to start focusing on that supply chain pipeline and start moving product to figure out how that transportation corridors are going to open. We need to move to establishing the policy when it comes to, hey, can I test these facilities at can I use material to actually test these components at my testing facility before I transport and put it on wheels? We need to be aggressively tackling those policy and regulatory opportunities now so that we can start moving towards implementation. And then focusing on the sustainment piece all through and through. Lastly, just future research, right? So just looking at how things are when it comes to state and local engagement, whether it comes to funding. There was one, the National Association of Counties did a study a couple of years ago. I just offer it because I think that might be a great vehicle to establish a sustained pipeline where you can capture everything that's happening with SMR implementations, track all those over time to see how it's working, whether there is going to be an EPZ or it's going to be site boundary. And then how those implementations actually go. Track all those pieces so it's easier for that next county, for that next owner-operator, for that next vendor to be able to successfully implement an SMR at the local level. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Tired from lunch? Yeah, I got a big spotlight on me, so we're kind of forced to be awake up here. You know, I want to echo Dr. Rockebrand here. Really appreciate Cindy and Dwayne inviting me to come do this. I'm very humbled and honored to be up here. My name's Kevin Bourne. I'm the Division Administrator for the Emergency and Radiological Services Division for the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, right? That's a mouthful. In this industry, everyone has acronyms, so we go by ERSD, LDEQ. For this conference, I'm the Radiation Programs Materials Manager. We're an agreement state with the NRC. While we don't have the nuclear side of the house, we have the off-site response organizations. So that's kind of where we fall into play. Ms. Cindy and Mr. Dwayne asked me to come talk about emergency alerting, specifically IPAWS. They wanted me to touch on the all hazards for the emergency response world, specifically for Louisiana, and then where we kind of fit with the advanced reactors, SMRs, and things of that nature. So IPAWS, does everyone know what IPAWS is? If you don't, now you do, right? It's right there on the screen. Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. IPAWS was, if I'm not mistaken, in 2006 with the response to Hurricane Katrina, which, shocker, in Louisiana. That's where IPAWS all kind of started. It was with the response efforts from the federal, local, state governments. DHS decided that they needed to implement some kind of system. So FEMA issued, I believe it was in 2017, a memorandum indicating that IPAWS can be used at the state, local, tribal levels for the primary and or backup alerting system for nuclear power plants for their off-site response organizations, right? I keep saying off-site response organizations, OROs is what we call them, right? Acronyms. So your local governments, your fire departments, your police stations, your hospitals, things of that nature, anyone who's going to be involved in the response efforts if there is an issue at a nuclear power plant. It alerts the public of real-time emergencies, gives a clear, concise instructions on A, what's going on, B, where to go find more information. I'm going to try not to take their spotlight too much because we're going to do a demonstration on the IPAWS, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the IPAWS and how it all works. But it's really neat. It can allow geofencing for a specific area, which is great for public officials, different situations. If you don't want to broadcast to a large area, the whole state, half the state, you can specifically narrow it down, if I'm not mistaken, to this room. I mean, a very small area, and you can send that message out. The good thing about Louisiana, because we have so much going on down there, our local governments are already using some form of electronic wireless notification. So us transitioning to IPAWS, the concept of it is not a very heavy lift. Right now for Louisiana, the nuclear power plants, we have 2 nuclear power plants in Louisiana, one right across the river in Port Gibson. Currently use sirens, and then backup alert routings with helicopters, fire departments. They fly around and drive around for the backup alert routing, saying a specific message so the affected public and the EPZs get the information. Sirens are good, sirens are bad, right? You push a button, they go off. Where they're good is most people can hear them. The local populations know what they mean. They know where to go. They know where to tune in, and they can get the information they need. Bad part is transient populations, visitors, however you want to look at it. They may not know what it means. Sirens could ensue, mass panic. Pros, cons, regardless, moving forward, technology is the way to go. So the wireless emergency alerting is kind of where we're looking at. As of Tuesday of last week, my slides became out of date because the NRC approved the design report for Riverbend. So Riverbend is no longer seeking approval. They got approval last week. So the 3 power plants, Riverbend Station in St. Francisville, that's around the capital area, around Baton Rouge. Waterford 3 Station, which is in Kelowna, Louisiana, kind of further towards New Orleans. Everyone knows New Orleans, right? Mardi Gras, we just had Mardi Gras. Everything was great, still recovering from it. And then Grand Gulf Nuclear Station, Port Gibson, Mississippi, right across the river. But we do have one parish, right? They keep talking about counties. We like to be different. We're full of culture. We call them parishes. So to complicate it even more, but one of our parishes is in that 10-mile EPZ, so we are part of that planning process. Sorry, I'm old school. I got to flip through my notes. So IPAWS, like I said, out of date. We've now been approved. It was a long, lengthy process doing the design report with FEMA and NRC. NRC has approved it. The work isn't over. We still have to update all the plans and procedures with all the OROs, with Riverbend, with our internal procedures. So it's not flip of a switch, now we go to IPAWS. We still got some work to do. On top of that, the way Riverbend is stationed, which Dr. Rockebrand said, you said it was 55 parishes? 55 sites. Just for one Riverbend, for the Riverbend station, where it's positioned, we have 5 parishes, counties that it affects. So it's just kind of in that perfect little spot where it touches all the parishes around it. So that's just a lot of OROs that have to update their plans and kind of get everything in motion. So there's still a little bit of time before it's done, but it's on its way. We did run into an issue whenever we tested IPAWS, which that's why we do the planning and training, right? The whole rep world is planning for a disaster, hoping that it doesn't happen, right? So we did a test, and we found that the vendor, the way I understand it is the local authorities have used different vendors, Everbridge, Rave, there's different vendors that they use to push out these emergency alerting notifications. Well, there was a character issue. So they sent out the notification, and IPAWS didn't like it, or I guess Everbridge didn't like it, and it wouldn't let them send it. We figured that out. We ended up being successful with the test. So that's why we tested, but that was the only issue that we found with it, and we corrected it. So moving on to all hazards, kind of like I started the presentation, IPAWS was because a hurricane came to Louisiana, and it devastated the New Orleans area. So I put some random facts up there just to kind of show everyone that, whether it's the vibrant culture, the excellent cuisine, the thriving music industry, even natural disasters want to come to Louisiana. 6 hurricanes made direct landfall. With hurricanes come lots of tornadoes, lots of flooding, right? We're a low-lying state. Everything south of Interstate 10 is susceptible to flooding. And unlike most people in Louisiana want to live in the uninhabitable areas. They want to live in the swamps and the marshes and the hard-to-reach places. So, we're an interesting crew. I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana, in the south. I'm a weed. We don't transplant well, right? We know what we like it down there. So, some facts up on the board, 11,689 release notifications, 4,700 emergency responses. Unfortunately, we rang off the year with a terrorist attack, terrible, and then the snow. The snow really shut us down. When you get 11 inches of snow in South Louisiana, we were in a bind. We didn't know how to act, we didn't know how to drive, and they shut some stuff down. So kind of the reason I wanted to point this out, Cindy and Dwayne asked me to talk about it, is the all hazards, right? Because of the Mississippi River and all of the other industries that we do have in Louisiana, very, very large chemical, petrochemical industry. New Orleans has a big port. Lake Charles has a big port. LNG, liquefied natural gas, is real big right now in Lake Charles on that end of the state. So we have a lot of other industry that unfortunately has a lot of issues and has a lot of releases and causes a lot of problems. So we are very, very well in tune with emergencies and evacuations and shelters in places and road closures. So the local, all the alerting starts at the local level, and then it goes up from there. So we have been using these wireless alerting systems for quite some time now. We have a system called Get a Game Plan. It's a really good app that is run by the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, GOSEP. So it allows you to access emergency information. You can almost make your own little spreadsheet on what emergencies might impact you depending on where you live, where you're trying to go. You can set up your evacuation routes. It's a really neat app that just allows the public to help them fend for themselves and not rely so much on the local or the state government. And also, you can mark yourself safe, right? Everyone sees that on Facebook. You mark yourself safe when something happens. So it has that same feature in there, but it's unlike social media. It's everyone's got to ground check social media, right? You can put whatever you want on social media. It's very dangerous. Whereas the Get a Game Plan app, if something happens and it puts in there, it's good. They're not just looking for it for likes. I wanted to touch on this just a little bit. Shocker, another hurricane, Ida, in 2021 came through, and it caused some pretty widespread damage to that southeastern part of Louisiana, really from Baton Rouge all the way over to the Mississippi River to Venice, Louisiana, not Venice, Italy. And Waterford 3 is in that area, in St. John the Baptist and St. Charles Parish. So there were certain capabilities that were impeded, and because of the widespread damage that the hurricane caused, we actually did a virtual disaster initiator review, a DIR. And if I'm not mistaken, could be wrong, I think it was one of the first, if not the first, virtual DIR that was done. So, we worked through the process. There was little hiccups here and there, but with the assistance from the utility and the at-risk parish local authorities, we were able to get the questionnaire complete. So some of the things that were hindered with that hurricane were the cell phone coverage went down, so our operational hotline and our state police reporting line went down. And the communication was just a bit of a disaster, to be brutally honest. And then also we had to change might be on the next slide. Yeah, we had to change the reception centers that were designated for the nuclear power plants were used for shelters because of the evacuations and the flooding. So we had to change up the verbiage a little bit on the emergency alerting messages, but we got it done with the locals, and then we had to deal with the social media aspect, right? Everyone says all these things on social media, and if you say the wrong thing over and over and over, people start thinking it's the truth. So we kind of had to go through that a little bit, but we got it done, and we worked with our federal partners and our utilities, and it ended up being a success. Lastly, I was asked to talk a little bit about advanced reactors, just kind of how we fit in moving forward, starting the next 50 years, right? I mean, really and truly, I think Dr. Rockaban is trying to put me and my crew out of a job, right? Because no rep program so much because it's not there. But we're excited about the advanced reactors, microreactors, the SMRs. We have our Public Service Commission hosted a 2-day conference just kind of talking about the economic impacts, how they can fit into Louisiana, how we can use them, how industry can use them. We have a lot of industry in Louisiana that could very much so benefit from this new nuclear. We have a couple military bases in Louisiana that we've gone and visited, and they're very interested in the SMRs. So we've met with them. They're keeping us involved, keeping us in the loop. We're trying to, help them, guide them through the process. That this is an NRC thing, but we're here to help you, to support you in any way that we can. So to sum it up, IPAWS, it's great. We're using it. We're kind of already using that technology, and we plan to continue using it. Lessons learned from the DIR, but honestly, I think it was great that we were able to do it virtually. We had the issues from the hurricane. Thankfully, Waterford 3 didn't have any issues from that hurricane, but had they had them, we were able to work around them. And then, the economic growth and the excitement of the SMRs coming our way. That's all I have.
Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists. At this time, I'd like to introduce our IPAWS team from FEMA. We have with us Ms. Brittany Marshall and Mr. Joseph Webster, and they are going to walk our audience through a demonstration of IPAWS.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Brittany Marshall. I am the Emergency Communications and Training Operations Assistant Manager at the IPAWS Technical Support Service Facility. So today my presentation will touch on what IPAWS is. I know that Kevin asked how many people knew what IPAWS was. I wasn't able to see a show of hands, so I'm going to ask again. How many people are familiar with IPAWS? All right, that's good. Okay. So IPAWS is the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It is comprised of an ecosystem that entails with wireless emergency alerts, which is what pops up on your phones, that very attention-grabbing alert sound that you may hear, that instant vibrating, that's wireless emergency alerts. Then we have our emergency alert system, which is your TVs, radios, cable stations, where you may see my partner over there to the side, those devices that are sitting on the table there. You also have NOAA weather, or National Weather Service, where we piggyback off of EAS. We're able to take that alert from the EAS field, push it to the field offices where someone is able to modify it just a little bit and then push it out to the intended area. Then we have our future technologies, which is internet and any other emerging technologies where if someone is able to tap into our IPAWS feed, the public feed, downstream devices, think kiosks, Lamar billboards. If they're able to tap into our IPAWS feed, they can present those alerts in real time as the alerting authorities are sending out alerts. So on this page here, we have our IPAWS progress. 85% of the U.S. population is covered underneath IPAWS, which means there is an alerting entity, whether it's a police department, emergency management agency, someone within a county or in the state has IPAWS privileges to be able to send out notifications. We have about 1,900 alerting authorities, and that is comprised of states, counties, local municipalities that come into an agreement to share IPAWS privileges with one another. This is our architecture here. So this is typically how IPAWS works. An alerting agency or alerting authority would sign up for IPAWS. As Kevin said, it takes a little bit of time, but we get you pushed through. They receive their digital certificates. The federal, someone that is classified as an alerting authority is the federal agency, state agencies, territorial and tribal governments, and also local alerting authorities, tongue twister, which consist of the parishes in Louisiana or counties in other states. They would acquire a software, Everbridge, Rave. There's about 25 different softwares that are out there and available to the public that they would be able to send IPAWS alerts with. They would then put together an alert, type it up in a software. We will show that on the screen briefly, and it's pushed through our aggregator, which is IPAWS Open. IPAWS makes sure that that alert is compliant and is able to be picked up on cell phones and transmitted through EAS devices. It is then pushed out through the EAS system, WIS, NOAA Radio, any other internet-based services, and people who are also testing for future technologies. So essentially, it gets out to the public relatively fast. IPAWS, the difference between IPAWS and mass notifications. In some of your neighborhoods, you may have opted in through your local government to receive alerts as something that you have to put your information into. You give them your cell phone number, you give them your email address, and you're opting in to receive those alerts or notifications. IPAWS is an opt-out system, which means that typically most people would have to go into their cell phones and toggle off emergency alerts in order to not receive it. We don't want you to do that. We would prefer that you keep them toggled on so that you don't miss any important information. However, it's a one-to-many channel. So think the difference between it is IPAWS, you don't have to do anything to receive it. It's going to automatically come to your phone if you are in that geo-targeted area. Mass notification, you're only going to get it if you have opted in to receive it through your state or local agency. So, who can send IPAWS alerts, or when can you send IPAWS alerts? We tell our alerting authorities that they can send an alert anytime they deem that it is necessary. So that's for evacuations, disaster resources, missing persons, children, water contamination, anything that you can think of. We don't put any restrictions on when you should send an alert. If you think that it poses a threat to life and property, you can use IPAWS to get out information. Here's an example of how we have been working with our local agencies or alerting authorities as well as power plants in order to push out information. You can use IPAWS to announce siren tests. In Alabama, Dothan, Houston County, they sent out an alert testing their system, letting their population know that they were going to be testing the sirens at that plant and not to be alarmed or fear anything that there wasn't an emergency showing up. The next one would be in Los Angeles for a hazmat incident where they notified their public that incoming traffic going into the island, the terminal was closed, and what they needed to be aware of, and also be mindful that they could go to the local website in order to pull up more information. So with WIA, as I said before, it is a non-subscription based service. It is not, you don't have to sign up for it. There's no network congestion. So even if you are on the phone or you're texting someone else, it is a broadcast service. It does not compete with the congestion of the regular text messages that are coming through on your device. All major carriers participate in it. It's a fast delivery. Again, like I said, it's that attention-grabbing tone, and it recognizes polygons and circles. So something that Kevin mentioned before was that you could geofence as small as this room or building. Is technically 2 city blocks. So you can triangulate down as small as 2 city blocks to send out an alert. There is a 1/10 of a mile bleed over, which means that someone the next block over could potentially receive that alert, but that is as far or as close as we've been able to narrow it down for you. In this image up on the screen, it shows you that inner circle is the intended area that was meant to be notified. That outer circle is that 1/10 of a mile bleed over. So that is how close we've been able to get it down to the intended area. With WIAs, you are able to cancel or update an alert. So emergencies and accidents happen and they change over time, and you need to be able to provide instant information out to the public as soon as you get it. So some softwares allow you the ability to be able to cancel and update, whereas other softwares you have to cancel it and then send a new message. Cancel and update operates in a way that it stops the broadcast of the first message and then it sends out a new message for you. So it just lets that person that's in that area know that emergency may have been cleared out and it's canceled, and now you can move forward. It's all clear and you don't need to worry about it. Okay. We also recommend that alert authorities are testing in the live environment. With the FCC, you are able to send at least 2 live alerts. You must announce it to the public when you are testing. Do a small campaign letting them know, hey, we're going to be testing the system. Your phone may go off, EAS may go off, but you have to announce it to the public that you're going to be testing. With that, you can test in the live environment with the RWT code as many times as you want to. That's required weekly tests. However, if you want to test and you want to make sure that cell phones are receiving the message, you have to use maybe local area emergency, but you have to announce it. You get 2 of those tests per year. Other than that, we are able to assist you at the IPAWS Technical Support Facility with sending out those alerts. Now, I want to quickly touch on cross-jurisdictional alerting because Kevin brought that up with Kennesaw Parish. With the nuclear plants that are within your areas or your communities, we have a few alerting authorities that go into a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, which means they share privileges with each other in order to be able to back up and send that alert out on each other's behalf. We are able to assist you at the technical support facility with crafting those agreements or putting your escalation plans, alert escalation plans together. So an example of that would be on the screen, Beaver Valley Power Station. They recently did a test in September. So for Beaver County, located in Pennsylvania, it also touches on Columbiana County in Ohio and Hancock, West Virginia. That plant is situated right there on those state and county lines. So what they typically do is Beaver County will send an alert out first, then Columbiana will send an alert out next, and then Hancock. But they are still able to share privileges with one another so that if one couldn't get the alert out, the next one can. I'm gonna skip through down to our universal challenge. So we like to show this slide at IPAWS when we do our presentations because a lot of our alerting authorities experience extreme anxiety when they are or are in the face of having to send out an alert. We try to work with them to let them know that we are there for them every step of the way. IPAWS is 24/7. Joe and myself, we work on a team where we monitor the entire U.S. 24/7 to provide assistance with if an alerting authority needs help with pushing an alert out. So we work with them with testing. We test in a demo environment. You may have heard the device go off a few minutes ago. It's turned to our closed environment, which St. Charles Parish had sent out an alert. That's who you heard come across there. However, we try to alleviate that anxiety so that when minutes matter and you have to push out an alert, that you're not overcome with anxiety and grief with having to push that button. We help you prepare templates. We go through training. You tell us what it is that you want to master and craft. We will work with you at IPAWS to make sure that you are successful at the end of the day. That is the end of my presentation, before I get into our demonstration. But if you have any questions about IPAWS, you can reach out to the IPAWS FEMA lab or our FEMA-IPAWS lab, and we would be happy to assist you and answer any questions that you may have. I am going to pull up a software here that we use to send alerts. This is called AlertSense. This is one of the 25 softwares that is available to the public for them to be able to send alerts out. I already have a template crafted for today's exercise, so that's going to cut down on time. And that's something that we also preach to our alerting authorities, is to put your templates together so that you can just press the button and go. So give me just a moment. Can you see? Nope. Okay, let me see if I can move it over. Nope. All right, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second.
Can we call St. Charles Parish?
They would be, when it went off, I said, oh, wow, okay. So that's 1 and 2. All right. You have it geared up? Okay. Let's see. We're going this way. Here we go. Now it's very small. There we go. Okay. Okay, the internet is messing with me today. Jill, can you send the alert for me? Either way, with AlertSense, you're able to go through and put in your information. AlertSense is one of the tools where it automatically prescripts a lot of that information for you just based off of the permissions that you ask the state to approve for you. So all alerting authorities have to seek permission through the state in order to become an IPAWS alerting authority. With that, what we would do, with that, they modify your search so that you are able to pull up your information. You don't have to go through, select any of the scrolls or drop down. Once you select your event code, it automatically pre-populates information for you, and you just have to craft your message for your EAS and your WIA portions. The cool thing with AlertSense is that it gives you a preview of what it would look like as it scrolls across televisions and what it may look like as it appears on cell phones. It gives you an option to triangulate or geofence a particular area with a easy-to-use map, and then you would save it and then send it out. AlertSense has really done a lot of improvement with its software since Hawaii and their false missile alert, okay? So it is one of the cooler softwares to use and be able to use. Joe, you ready to go? Like all things technology, it takes a little bit of time. This is one of our traveling displays that we take with us, which is a giant cell phone, and then the EAS devices. The EAS devices are commonly found in radio stations and cable TV stations. With that cell phone over to the side, it gives you, that's the EAS devices going off now.
Text message. A radiological accident has occurred at the Indian Head Power Plant at 2:15 p.m. Exposure to even small levels of radiation can be dangerous to health and safety. If you are outside, go inside the nearest building and into a small interior
So with EAS audio, you get 2 minutes of audio time, 1,800 characters that can be converted over to text-to-speech. Typically, when the alerts go off, or as you all may have witnessed when we did our last national test, with the testing, we have equated that EAS messages typically broadcast within 2 to 3 minutes. Cell phones receive it instantly as soon as the tower recognizes it. What I will say is that a reminder to you all, broadcasters do not have to push out EAS messages. So we encourage our alerting authorities to build strong relationships with their state emergency communications committees within their states and their broadcasters to make sure that they push out certain messages. Some of them will, but you do have some that may be a little stubborn, and you may want to forge a good relationship with them to make sure that they push those alerts out for you. At the IPAWS lab, if you want a more in-depth tour, we are located at the National Harbor, where we have a host of downstream devices, sirens, also different EAS devices, softwares that we can demo for you. We can set it up virtually, or you're more than welcome to stop by and we can set something up for you where you're able to view the facility and see all of the ways that IPAWS is able to interact with the community. That's it for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Brittany and James. And thank you to our panelists, Dr. Sujiyama, Dr. Rockerbrand, and Mr. Bourne. Thank you very much. We have some questions that have been sent, and hopefully we have enough time to get through all of the questions. Dr. Sujiyama, we have 2 questions that are on the same thing. And I'll read one out and try to incorporate the second one, but they're basically the same. You raised your concern about the continued availability of a private app for notifications, the Yahoo Japan app. Could you provide some more thoughts on the importance of private-public partnerships as we prepared for advanced reactors? And to that end, the other question was, is there any movement right now in the Japanese government to contract with Yahoo Japan?
Okay, thank you. It's a very practical question, and so now I have just some, how to say, sense of problem. But so at this moment, so I don't know if Japanese government try to make contract or agreement with Yahoo Japan. At this moment, I have no knowledge about that. But I heard that from my colleagues of the cabinet office. Yahoo Japan, at this moment, they don't want to make agreement with governmental organizations because in this case, they need many agreements with independent agencies. So, because they cover various disasters and the authorities are different in Japan. So, maybe, and you know, so in Japan, so Japanese government is going to build a new agency for emergency, disaster. So this is just my personal guess, but that new agency could be good, how to say, one, how can I, contact point with Yahoo Japan. Yeah, just my guess. And at this moment, Yahoo Japan has close contact with each prefectures that has nuclear power stations, and they hear the local government opinions, and they reflect their opinion to their applications, but not with such relation, not such relation with Japan governmental agencies. That's my answer at this moment.
Thank you, Dr. Sujiyama. Next question up is for Kevin Bourne. What concerns, if any, do you have for the transition I guess for Riverbend, to IPAWS or any other site to IPAWS, with potential broad cell tower outages during hurricane landfalls? And do we anticipate the need to maintain emergency sirens as defense in depth?
Yeah, so obviously that was part of my conversation with the cell coverage issues. You know, we've come a long way since then, but there is still the backup routing, right? That's still an option. That's why we have a backup. You have to have a primary and a backup. As far as the sirens are concerned, I can't really speak for that. We've been talking with the utilities. You know, the sirens do cost a lot to maintain and to operate, just with the normal maintenance. I know the parishes really like using the sirens as well. They like having that at their disposal. So, I mean, honestly, until it happens and we have that issue, I can't speak on that, but I don't foresee that being a problem, especially with the backup routing still in place.
Thank you. Dr. Rockerbrand, I have a question for you. Are there particular response functions that are readily adaptable to AI, and are there any functions for which AI may not be the right tool?
Yeah, so it's a great question, thank you. So I think it really comes down to the question of what you're comfortable with, and I think that's going to be determined at that local level. So can I use AI? Let's just talk first about messaging. It's funny, I look at the alert, and my first thought is, as a citizen, what do I do next? This is a one-way flow of information. And so the evolution, if we think about the next 25 years, which is significant time, how does AI help this equation, right? So if I'm sitting there, my first thing is, you know, what do I do with can I go get my kids? I have to shelter in place. What do I do with my pets? I'm going to self-evacuate. Where am I going to go? All those questions that come to mind, literally people are talking to their phones now and expecting answers. And so we need to be prepared for that now, not 25 years from now. So I think there's a tremendous amount of utility. The question really comes down to who owns that messaging, and how do you differentiate between a state and a local message? Even a local and a local message, to your point about having 5 parishes in that same vicinity. So I think there's tremendous utility there, but I think that it's very nascent, and we still need to learn a lot from that. On the operations side of the house, I think there is tremendous value when it comes to real-time inspections and predictive maintenance, where we traditionally have seen things done on a rotational basis, whether it's monthly, quarterly, annually. We see that now, especially in the private sector, where it is literally second by second, minute by minute, inventory control, warehouse control. They're using drones for inspections and safety and security measures. That type of AI piece, I think, is at the ready to be adopted when it comes to nuclear and specifically with SMRs. And I think the last piece there is just the level of comfort as to what triggers that response. Again, is it, if I identify a pipe valve problem or a flow issue, is AI able to take action on that if it's a rudimentary fix, or do I require human intervention in that interpretation of what that challenge looks like? And there's a lot of questions as to regulatory controls, the authority to do so, what are the ramifications if there's an unintended consequence, things like that. So I think I encourage everyone just to think through those opportunities, and we have a conversation to share what those findings are. That, to me, is most important. We can't keep it in a box. I appreciate, on the private sector side, the willingness to protect IP and to focus on new MOUs and new contracts that are out there. But as we go through this proliferation of implementation, it's really important to strive to share what those findings are without any concern for ramifications and the such. So thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, I have another question for you. The NRC has established standards for emergency preparedness that ensure capabilities are in place to take protective actions. The NRC has identified 4 of the 16 planning standards as being risk significant for public health and safety. Across all hazards, what emergency response function do you consider the most important to public health and safety and should be a focus for the next 50 years? Let me read it again.
Yeah, that was a long question.
The NRC has established standards for emergency preparedness that ensure capabilities are in place to take protective actions. The NRC has identified 4 of the 16 planning standards as being risk significant for public health and safety. Across all hazards, what emergency response function do you consider the most important to public health and safety and should be a focus for the next 50 years?
Yeah, I think just using the technology that's out there for the public awareness, public alerting, and just, you know, really public involvement. You would be very surprised to learn of the people that live in Louisiana that don't even know we have nuclear power plants in our state. I mean, it is shocking that whenever, you know, friends, family start asking about my job and what we do, like, nuclear power plants, we don't have any in Louisiana. Like, oh, actually we do, you know. So I think just that public alerting and making sure that we have those response capabilities to keep the public safe and aware of what to do, how to do it, where to get the information, where to go. I mean, ultimately that's the most important, you know, for the piece of the nuclear power plants.
Thank you. And I have a question here that's to the podium, to the entire panel. I'll read it out, and we'll start with you, Kevin, and Ryan, and Dr. Sujiyama, and then I'll offer a response myself. The question is, since some nuclear plants have switched from sirens to IPAWS, we often receive concerns that IPAWS doesn't reach older populations who don't rely on smartphones or other technology. What are your thoughts on this concern?
Yeah, so your phone, when the siren goes off, the local populations still know what that means and what to do, whether you're old or not old. Same thing with your phones. You're still getting alerted of the emergency as it happens. Obviously, nothing's perfect. You know, no matter what the case is, you're not going to be able to reach absolutely every single person, and absolutely every single person is going to know exactly what to do. There's just there's nothing perfect with an emergency situation. There's always going to be gaps, and I think that's where you ultimately rely on your local government, your local authorities. They're the first responders. They are the ones on scene, on the ground, that are responsible for making sure that their populations are protected. No matter what the utility has in plan, no matter what the NRC has in plan, the state, it all boils down to the local government to protect their people from whatever the disaster is, whatever the issue is. And I think, you know, speaking for Louisiana specifically, we're good at that, unfortunately, and you know, it works for our state.
So I'll just, let me read some AI to you. So AI just told me that 2 years ago, 97% of the population has a cell phone. 90% of that 97% has a smartphone. And that's 2 years old data. So I don't think it's a question of do they have a device that can receive it? I think it comes down to sustainability and how long they can power that, right? So we see environments where we have long outages, and the first thing people do is they go hide and sit in their cars because they're charging their phones. And so it all comes back to this power thing for me. I think we're good at messaging. I think people are going to find that trusted source of information, whatever that might be. But it's funny, you know, we used to joke that, you know, my grandparents' generation, it was, you know, 4 hours before that was a trusted source. They would validate information because they'd have to turn on the TV and find something. And my parents, it was 4 minutes, and now it's 4 seconds today. Because people immediately flip to that cell phone and they take the first thing that's in their feed, and that's what they define as a trusted source of information. So the question is, are you part of that conversation? And how are you complementing that feed and combating that feed if it is misinformation or disinformation. So I think that's more the challenge that I see, is making sure that you have a voice in that conversation. I think the technology and the capability is there. I speak for my kids, and I'm sure everybody else's, that it's like a third arm, so you're not going to get it detached from them. We see it in challenges in secure environments where people just don't want even those jobs because they don't want to put their cell phone in a box. I think that's another challenge. But having that opportunity, I think the technology's there. It's just how do we capitalize on it.
Okay, so the smartphone is not their only communication tool. So of course, so we have a conventional communication method. And especially for old people, so they are, so typically in Japan, so they are belonging to some local, very local neighbors, communities. So we expect, so some of them got information and they will move in group. And but smartphone, I expect smartphone will be a very, very powerful tool to trace the people even after evacuation. So I mentioned about local government application for registered people. For registered people, so they can receive information even after evacuation. That's a very strong point. So yeah, in Japan, so for registered people and for people in that area, so both complementary applications are very effective. But of course, people need to install the application. So yeah, of course, so not all people can receive the information. That's it.
From our perspective, as you heard Ms. Brittany Marshall mention, and she went through, IPAWS is not just limited to cell phone communications. EAS also goes out via TV and radio, and there are very few old people that I know that are not watching TV. But again, when we, the NRC, receive an alert and notification system design report that's been approved from FEMA, there is a section where FEMA has worked with the states and the off-site response organizations where they identify how they intend to communicate with what they consider to be vulnerable communities, which would include the elderly, those who are disabled or handicapped and deaf, and even communities that are non-English speakers. So we do look at that, and I know FEMA works with the off-site response organizations for that. So that's, we think that the plan and the whole community approach, we really do take a very, I want to say sound and mature approach in making sure that we're not leaving anyone behind with respect to those communications. Well, with that, we have no additional questions right now. So I want to, again, I ask you to join with me in giving a clap of appreciation to our distinguished panel members. And from the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission, thank you for your time. For those of you who've traveled, Commissioner Sujiyama, you traveled the farthest. We appreciate your efforts in coming here. For Kevin, for coming all the way up from the Bayou State, my home state, you didn't mention that. And Ryan for coming right up the pike, so we appreciate you. Thank you, and with that, the session is over.